Back at it here on the Kaufman Corner as we talk about a little bit of front office maneuvering from the Kansas City Royals. We thought they were done. Turns out that they are not done, that they are still adding to the front office, and it looks like with quite a Latin American flavor, at least what the specialties will be for the gentlemen that they've added. We'll talk about that tonight. What else do the Royals have to do before they go to spring training? What would a greater Latin American influence do for this ball club? We'll talk about the release that the Royals put out along with the Chiefs. Friday news dump, 5 o'clock on a Friday. Royals and Chiefs saying they're willing to commit to Jackson County, talking about $200 million in savings this go around for Jackson County. I won't get too deep into it, but we'll just talk about what this means big picture for a stadium there with the Royals. And our simulation has been done. We had a listener reach out to us and find out which one of our all-time teams that we worked on so diligently with the last two podcasts, who got the better of it. We'll find that out here tonight as well. It's all coming up right now on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany and the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome. If you catch us via the podcast, remember you can always catch us on the stream. We stream live, usually Sunday nights at 10 p.m. We're coming to you a little bit late tonight because we knew, we got a lot of Royals fans. We knew we'd have a lot of Chiefs fans as well. If you're a Royals fan, certainly there's a lot of folks that are also Chiefs fans. So we thought, well, we better look out. There's an important football game going on right now involving the Bills and Dolphins. So we waited a little bit. So if you've been waiting on us, if you follow Rany and I on Twitter, we were making you aware of what the plan was going to be for the podcast. So we start a little bit late, but Rany, we've got real honest to God news as we both thought early on when Bridgie was hired. On the drafting side of things that, okay, they're bringing in an outside view, an outside look to what it is they're doing. But we thought, we really expected more out of the front office. And at that time also, we were finding out that Jin Wong was leaving the Royals organization, his decision, to be honest, to be quite clear on how that worked. And so we're like, all right, what's going on here? And then they got into the free agent moves. We liked what we saw out of the free agent moves. They checked every box on the list that they said that they were going out shopping for. But we still said we really thought there was going to be a little bit more for the front office. Now we see two hires by the Kansas City Royals. If people didn't see the release, they've hired Johnny DiPuglia, I'm going to guess, because that's Curtis's best guess, as Special Assistant of International Scouting, D.I., capital P, UGLIA, and Fred Guerrero, coordinator of player evaluation. If you're wondering where these gentlemen came from, and I think this is one of the things that's kind of interesting. DiPuglia, hired as the, as I mentioned, special assistant of international scouting, came from the Washington Nationals, where he spent the last 15 seasons overseeing the club's international operations, most recently as title vice president and assistant GM of international operations. Guerrero was from the Twins organization, been there for 20 years, director of Latin American scouting and U.S. integration since 2014 with the Twins, been a scout before that since 2004. Just overall, your reaction to this, that there was more for the front office to get done.
Yeah, no, I was very pleased, actually. I mean, this is the less sexy time of the offseason. We have the free agent signings, and certainly in the short term, that's going to make more of an impact on the team. But we both want the Royals to be building something for the long term, build a foundation here. And sometimes the most important moves made for building a long-term winner are those front office hirings of people you've never heard of. who come in and, identify the talent that in 5 or even 10 years from now will be, starring for the Royals. Um, and that was last winter. That was sort of the mild red flag that I think we both had. That they fired Mike Matheny and Cal Elder immediately, brought in Brian Sweeney and Quatrero and Zach Bove, but they didn't seem to make a whole lot of other front office changes. This year, they the weak link was the scouting department. The draft has been a thorn in their side for a long time, and they went and hired Bridges at the end of the year, and then things kind of went cold on that front. And we got a little nervous, like you said, but then they started signing players, and that was certainly a more urgent need. But it's not just that they went out and hired two more guys from two different organizations. And I do like the fact that they're not just hired. Like you talk about Jin Wong. Jin Wong just got hired by the White Sox, actually. You may have seen that. And, there's a meme going around that the White Sox are trying to recreate the 2019 Royals. And this certainly doesn't do anything to change that. I don't know if you saw that the White Sox signed Brett Phillips to a minor league contract a couple of days ago. I looked it up. Yep, Brett Phillips was on the 2019 Royals. So, like, if they were even if a good organization, if they were hiring all these guys from one team, you want a cacophony of voices in the front office with different perspectives who've learned different things from the organizations they've been with. And hiring from the Nationals and the Twins, they've hired Zach Bove came from the Twins, but I don't think they've hired anyone else from that organization. The Nationals is a new organization to hire from, but specifically DiPuglia's background, even above and beyond the fact that they hired him or what they're hiring him for, when you dig into what he's done and why he was available in the first place, I actually like this hiring a lot more, because DiPuglia resigned from the Nationals in September. And you talk about how Jin Wong left the Royals of his own volition. DiPuglia left the Nationals of his own volition. It was kind of a big story at the time because it was a reflection of the turmoil that's going on in the Nationals front office right now. Like, the fact that he was available in the first place was not a reflection of his talent at all. If anything, quite the opposite. It was a reflection of the fact that the Nationals right now are going through so much turmoil with the general manager and the ownership not necessarily seeing things eye to eye, that he decided to leave the organization, even though he's a very well respected and talented observer of amateur talent. And so I consider this quite the coup that the Royals were the team that ultimately hired him, because for one thing, he's been basically running that the Nationals international operations for 15 years. He came out on 2009, and we talk about how when, like, Dayton Moore was hired, how the Royals were below expansion level in terms of their foundation. The Nationals international department was below ground when he was brought in 2009. It's not just, for one thing, they just moved from Montreal like 4 or 5 years earlier. So the franchise as a whole barely had an infrastructure when they moved to Washington in the first place after, I think, the 2004 season. But beyond that, he was brought in after. I can quote from the Washington Post. I don't want to besmirch anybody. In February of 2009, the team was embroiled in the Esmailin Gonzalez scandal, a problem Rizzo, their current general manager, inherited when he took over for Jim Bowden as GM. A federal probe revealed a flood of issues and forced the Nationals to shutter their facility in the Dominican Republic. It was revealed that Gonzalez, a heralded shortstop, was really Carlos Alvarez, and he had been 20 years old, not 16, when he signed for $1.4 million in 2006. Bowden resigned amid the fallout. Most of the international scouting staff was fired, and DiPuglia, a new voice from the Red Sox, had to basically start from scratch. So, like, that gives you an idea of what he was walking into. And mind you, he was with the Red Sox from 2005 to 2009. While he was with them, the Red Sox signed Xander Bogaerts, Hanley Ramirez, and Anibal Sanchez in a 5-year span. That is an impressive array of Latin American talent to begin with. But then to get to Washington, and as they say here, for the first 6 years or so, this is the Washington Post again, DiPuglia and his scouts had a ton of success, most notably signing Juan Soto. I'm just going to stop right there. Juan Soto. If I just stopped right there, the man signed Juan Soto. The Royals were rumored to be in on Juan Soto. The Nationals actually signed the Ted Williams of Latin America. So that right there. But then, and Victor Robles, 2/3 of the title-winning outfielder. Infielder Wilmer Defoe, reliever Wander Suero, and catcher Pedro Severino were some other international signings who made the majors. Obviously after Soto, everything looks like a letdown after that. But the point is, they have, starting from scratch, he built an infrastructure in Latin America that developed, identified, was able to sign and bring to the major leagues star talent. And to the best as I can tell, he's not replacing anyone. He is adding to the organization. He's going to be working alongside Rene Francisco. I think this is a really good complement, the two of them. And then, you mentioned the other guy. I don't know as much about Fred Guerrero.
Well, let's give Luis Arias,
Mhm.
Yenny Cano. I'm looking at their
Yep,
highlights.
Yenny
Danny
Cano.
Santana, Jorge
Jorge
Polanco,
Polanco.
Miguel Sano, all associated with him.
Mhm.
And the Twins we know have had success in Latin America as a whole. So one of the things you mentioned when you and I were chatting is that they're going to other organizations, right? We're getting – I love this idea of bringing in people like when you just bring in everybody that thinks the way you do, like what's the point? Right. But getting outside views and approaches. This shows that JJ Piccolo is not just Dayton Moore 2.0. It may not work. Right. It's not to say this is going to work,
Right.
but he is actively seeking other approaches and inputs. How'd you do it in Minnesota? How'd you do it in Washington? How'd you do it in San Francisco? Bridges, when they brought him in. You're getting a San Francisco view of things.
Mhm.
He's and we know Rays, Guardians, they were part of the coaching staff that's been brought in. You're bringing in a lot of organizations that have had success acquiring talent and getting their approaches and bringing it all under one roof. That's smart management.
Yeah, no, it is. And again, these additions are not going to bear fruit in the short term, right? And I hope that JJ has enough success in the short term that he will have the opportunity to see the fruits of these signings bear fruit, because this is you don't make these hirings if you're looking for a short-term fix. But at the same time, the Royals lost 106 games last year, and he can't afford another one of those 100 lost seasons, or he may not be there to enjoy the fruits of the talent these guys bring in. But it is heartening to see that regardless of how his tenure works out, he is thinking about the long-term needs of the organization and the need to not just win in the short term, which some of these free agents they're hoping will help with, but to actually build a foundation. There's an opportunity in this division, because there is no team in this division that is that dominates over the rest. There is an opportunity to build a Cardinals-like organization, an infrastructure, that a talent pipeline that is so good that by itself it makes you a contender every year, even without adding in free agents necessarily. If you build it from within well enough, in this division, you're going to be a contender every year. And I still think, I don't know why the Royals have not been able to accomplish that for the last 30 years. I certainly know that Dayton Moore talked about that all the time, but with the exception of that one massive wave of talent that came through around 2010, they just never been able to do it. And I think part of it is because after finding a wave of talent in Latin America in 2006 and 2007, signing those guys then, and then they became top prospects like Perez and Kelvin Herrera, Yordano Ventura 3 or 4 years later. But aside from that, they have just never hit in Latin America. And I really do think it is such an underrated part of their problem is finding those 16-year-olds and not wasting money on Eric Pena and Jason Guzman and Ciuli Matias. So if these guys can make a dent there, I really think it was a glaring weakness of the organization. And I'm really excited to see them address it.
We're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Why you should know Gann Asphalt and Concrete? Because if you're a parking lot, if you're a business owner, if you manage a business, accidents in the parking lot can take you away from that business. Inappropriate handicap parking means you can have folks, if it's faded or mislabeled, you can have folks parking in that handicap parking. That creates issues for you. Sloppy parking, that has people now parking in your loading zone. You can avoid all this. Low visibility and bad weather. You don't need that. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Don't risk liability in your parking lot. Don't list distractions when you can have them all solved by one contractor. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, online at gannasphalt.com. That's gannasphalt.com. I think you hit on the key is like we talked so much about drafting, and that's a big part of it. And they addressed at least bringing in an outside voice with Bridges with that move. But just a complete lack of Latin American talent is just as big, because that is one that, it's capped now, right? So you can't just spend away, which I wish you could. It would be better for a team like the Royals to say, okay, you know what? We're not going to put our assets here. In fact, I've talked to a number of people that think small markets would benefit by having no draft and just having it be spend whatever you want, wherever you want. And then if a small market team wanted to say, listen, we got $40 million that we can spend in free agency, but instead we're going to put $40 million on one player because we think this is the next Alex Rodriguez, then you could do it. It would be just raw scouting. I don't know that I subscribe to that. I'm intrigued by it. I'm open to the idea of it. But a small market club just cannot – you frankly, especially one located in the middle of America, you're not going to compete in the Asian market in all likelihood. For the most part, Hideo Nomo's the only Japanese pitcher, the only Asian player we've seen come to Kansas City, right? And that was at the very end of his career where he's just
don't forget the legendary Max Suzuki.
But Mac came over.
Well, nobody wanted him.
He came over here before his pro career, right?
He came out. He was not a prospect, I don't think, per se. Like, he wasn't like a major league ready prospect. Certainly.
I was thinking he was more of I maybe even in high school or something. Maybe I got that wrong.
It's been a while. I probably should look it up. But I mean, it is kind of to me, it's kind of weird. He ended up in Kansas City, to be honest, in the first place. He was actually with Seattle originally.
Right,
and wasn't successful there.
Yeah. So
and then
they didn't. What I'm saying is they didn't woo him out of Asia.
Right.
And both Matt and Noah John have said Nori Aoki, they traded Will Smith to the Brewers to get. So again, they did not woo him. He was already here and in the major league, realm.
They've spent some money on Korean amateur players, but again, those are not the established stars. Those are the 18-year-olds who could be anything, and so far none of them they haven't hit on any of those guys yet.
Right. But so Latin America they're much more likely destination to have success. And you're much more like, and the Japanese and even the Korean players now are coming over at high expenses, right? Mm-hmm. Because they have to perform over there in their major leagues. And so everybody knows, has a much better idea what they are. The Salvi Perez for $50K doesn't happen in Korea, right? It definitely doesn't happen in Japan. And so they have to have success in Latin America if they're going to have success talent-wise. And so that's why will it work? I don't know, but they've got two fresh sets of eyes with experience that have identified talent in the past. I don't know. Where would you rank this? If you rank the free agent signings and you threw in the three front office.
It's really tough. But I mean, I'll put Fred Guerrero separate just because I don't know enough about him, and I don't think he's coming in at quite this high level. I mean, Bridges is very important. Obviously, you and I have talked a lot about the draft issues. And DiPuglia, I mean, it's close. I mean, the draft is more important than Latin America, but not by as large a margin.
Throw in Seth Lugo. I'm talking about the players.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think which one of those is more important. I would probably put Bridges first. Look, if you actually think the Royals can win, make the playoffs in 2024, maybe you put Lugo higher. But I mean, I think they could, but I think it's still, a long shot. I think these two if we look back at the Royals 10 years from now and we say what was more important to this organization, I think you can make a case that both Bridges and DiPuglia had a greater impact on this franchise.
By the way, do you know DiPuglia? Or is it DiPuglia?
I don't.
Okay. All right.
We'll have to get a ruling.
You say DiPuglia, and I'll say DiPuglia.
And one of us is probably right.
One of us will be right. Yeah. No, listen, that's number one for me, just because of the upside. I think if we're talking about a guy who's identified, talents as Xander Bogaerts, Hanley Ramirez, Juan Soto, if you can get one of those, that's going to be so much more than frankly, in all likelihood, that you're going to get in the draft. And the biggest draft picks up at the top, for the most part, everybody knows who the top guys are, right? Like, yes, the Royals have managed to avoid them, okay? But, that's in and of itself a trick. That's it's just as hard to go 10 for 10 picking losers on bets as it is 10 for 10 for winners, right? Like, yeah, it's hard to do with the Royals. But like the expectation that they would continue at that pace is not likely. The math says that they will be better in the draft. This is the one that I think is the biggest signing of the offseason, to be honest with you, or at least the biggest upside of the offseason.
Right. It very well might be. I mean, here's the thing is that international talent as a percentage of the ball players in the major league continues to go up. And now we're close to a third of major league players are from foreign countries, and the bulk of that from Latin America. So you could easily see 25 to 30% of all major league talent comes from Latin America versus, let's say, 65 to 70 from the United States and Canada, the draft, right? So international is half as important as the entire draft. And yet, while, going into a draft, you know, you can go online. Even the most casual fan has probably heard of the top 5 or 10 prospects coming out of the draft. When international signing season opens up, very few people know who the best 16-year-olds out there are. So compared to how much attention it is given by the average baseball fan, I think Latin American signings at the amateur level, at the 16-year-old level, is incredibly underrated. And it takes longer to bear fruit. That's the other thing. They're 16. It could be 18 or 21 for the major leagues. You could be from the draft to the majors in 2 years. These guys are going to take 5.
Yeah,
but in the long run, they could have just as much of an impact.
And that's one of the other things I wanted to make sure we mentioned is that, like, the idea that you're going to see the returns on this immediately. No, you're not. Like, so don't be thinking like, the guys that they're going to sign are going to be, like you said, minimum 3 years away, right? And you've got some rock
Juan Soto's 3 years. Like that's how far.
Andrew
5 years
Jones,
really
3 years.
Right, exactly.
But for the most part, 5 years.
But precisely because it does take long, it is a good sign that the Royals made that a focus and are investing in a talent stream that is going to take half a decade to bear fruit, because you have to do it at some point or you'll never get that talent playing.
Yeah. And that's the kind of impact they need, because as we mentioned, Kelvin Herrera, Yordano Ventura, Salvador Perez, what kind of impact they had on the 14 and 15 seasons. And the Royals need that, and they need that on a regular basis. And so it's absolutely vital that this happens. Let's talk a little bit, because I know we're getting a late start tonight if you're catching us live. What else needs to get done, right? Because we want to get to our simulation. We're going to talk about the stadium as well. But like, you got anything you'd like to hear? JJ Picola was on my radio show, the program, on Sports Radio 810 WHB. If you're listening to us from where we know, we got people in countries all over the world, all over the country, 810WHB.com if you want to stream that, 2 to 6 Central Time. But had JJ Picola on, I don't know, it's been a couple of weeks now, I think. It was after the big free agent barrage came. And he said he'd still like to find a left-handed bat. That seemed to be the one thing that he was looking for. Is that it, or would you like to see even more before they head off to surprise?
No, honestly, I think that's a pretty good summation. I mean, when I look at the roster now with all the moves, the first thing that stands out to me is that they don't have any acute needs, right? They certainly, you always want to improve your talent base, especially when you're coming off 106 loss season. But I don't see any glaring holes. I mean, they have a starting lineup that, is the starting lineup that they intended to be. You got looking at like Fangraph's roster depth chart. I think it's instructive to look at. They have Melendez leading off in left field, then Bobby Witt, Salvador Perez, Vinny Pasquantino, Hunter Renfroe batting 5th in right field, and then Michael Massey, Nelson Velasquez, Kyle Isbell, Michael Garcia. I think that's a pretty good approximation of what the lineup might be on opening day. There are certainly guys there who are, I'm not certain are going to succeed, but everyone in that lineup either has had success or is young enough to dream on having success, especially when you combine their defense, like Isbell and Michael Massey. But there's 5 right-handers in that lineup, only 4 lefties. The bench, they have Freddie Fermin. I think that's pretty clear. Garrett Hampson, they signed obviously as a free agent. He's right-handed as well. They have Dairon Blanco. I think so Drew Waters is the only non-right-hander on the bench right now. They have a switch hitter, and then they have Dairon Blanco. I could see that spot also going to Nick Lofton. He's also right-handed. So there's basically only 4 non-right-handed hitting players on the currently projected opening day roster. So yeah, one more left-handed bat would be nice.
Where would you ideally like to see at what position?
Probably in the outfield. Again, that Dairon Blanco, that's the one spot. I mean, Blanco, I think, is very useful to have in the organization. If you can carry 14 players, which they very well might, and this is based on a 13 hitters and 13 pitchers. And I think 14-12 is actually maybe more likely. So, in fact, you might be able to fit that left-handed bat onto the roster without having to dump anybody. So, my guess would be, especially if they don't trade Michael Massey, like at this point, there's always a chance they trade somebody. But I don't, if they don't, I think that a left-handed hitting outfield is really the only thing that they, they really need to add here.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you can always find bullpen pieces. What I'll be interested to see is like, what happens. There's always somebody who overstated their value and is sitting out there as spring training has begun.
Mm-hmm.
Will they be in a position where they can add somebody once spring training's already gone, where somebody's looking around and like, okay, look, I'm ready. I thought I was going to get a 3 or 4 year deal, but I'll take a prove it 1 year deal, and no trade, blocking, so that if you want to trade me to a contender, great. I think there could be. You can always take another bullpen arm.
Sure,
right?
They're always, and those guys you could be a non-roster invitee that ends up making the team. But let's keep in mind they've added 3 relievers to their roster, right? Nick Anderson in a trade, and then Chris Stratton and Will Smith have been signed. So you add those 2 guys to the Scottish guys, MacArthur and McMillan. I mean, that's 5 relievers who weren't really on the team in July of last year,
right?
And so you even if you carry 8 relievers, and when we're saying they may even just carry 7, but even if it's 8. Carlos Hernandez is almost certainly going to be on the team in some capacity. And then
but that's the only 6 guys that I think you go, these are big leaguers, right? And I'm being generous with MacArthur and McMillan. Like, we've got small sample.
They're unproven. They're certainly unproven, and
right.
If they come into spring training, they could lose their spot on the roster in spring training, whereas the other guys could not. But I think they also have a good upside.
Yeah, I'm happy to count them in the mix, but I mean, I think you've got 2 spots because the rest of the guys are all guys that you control options on and can send down.
Well, except for Matt Sauer, the Rule 5 guy, he has to make the
That's
team.
True.
So, right. So Matt Sauer, if you like him, I mean, certainly you could add 1 or 2 more guys into the mix. I don't know if they necessarily need to give a guaranteed major league contract to another reliever, but certainly sifting through the bargain bin, because the bargain bin and relievers in February or March, somebody stuck out there can be some good finds there. Like being in the bargain bin doesn't mean the Royals are being cheap. It means they're just being resourceful and maybe taking advantage of an opportunity.
Well, it may be someone that told them no right now.
Right, exactly.
You still think that they're going to end up with a big offer, and then they come back around and say, okay, hey, I'm willing to take what it was, you were willing to offer me. Exactly. I wanted to see what the biggest unsigned.
I was honestly a little disappointed. I think it was a long shot anyway, but Michael Brantley announced his retirement this week. Great career, great guy, really underrated player for most of his career. But I thought he would have been like the perfect left-handed outfield bat to add to this roster. A high OBP guy, line drive, veteran presence, good in the clubhouse. If he didn't have much left, that's why he would have been available. But he chose to retire, so I don't know if there's anybody else out there quite like him, though.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through all the names on one of the websites, and I'm not totally. Well, I take it back. We come by some names. I just hadn't scrolled down far enough.
Who do you have?
Jock Peterson. I don't see him ending up at the Royals, but. I mean, there's starters. Marcus Stroman still hasn't signed, right?
We're not getting Stroman. I think his price tag. But Jock Peterson is an interesting player. If he's, I mean, he still has some pop in his bat. I do wonder if his price tag may also be out of there. If they're just looking to add a bench bat, then he's going to be out of their price range. If he's willing to take a 1 year make good deal and get a chance to start, or certainly be at least a platoon starter, get the bulk of the at-bats from the left side, I'd love to have a Jock Peterson type.
What about one of your all-time favorites? What about one Will Myers, not left-handed? How about Joey Gallo?
Joey Gallo, I mean, I'm for it, if only because it would be like a decisive statement from the team that we are no longer. This is no longer business as usual for the Kansas City Royals, because Joey Gallo is like the most unroyal like hitter you could possibly imagine, right? A guy who hit 177 last year, and his OPS plus was still over 100, meaning he was an above average hitter hitting 177 because of his walks and power. You don't want too many guys like Joey Gallo on your roster, but one Joey Gallo, sure, I'd love to have a guy like that.
Eddie Rosario.
Eddie Rosario. Let me see how he still got it. I have to review exactly his numbers last year. 255, 305, 450. Okay. Those, I mean, and he's, 30, 31. Like, all these guys are right on the precipice of being, over the hill, but on a short-term deal. I mean, this is the same age Hunter Renfroe was. That's one of the reasons why I was a little bit concerned about getting Renfroe, because you're committing to him for 2 years. Any of these guys on a 1-year deal, even 1 year with an option, I would be in favor of going after.
David Peralta, Brad Miller. I'm just coming up with left-handed bats in the outfield,
right?
That are out there. Austin Meadows. I'm giving you the whole list.
Peralta's going to be 36, and I think he's. I mean, he was a really good hitter for a few years, but I do think he's a non-roster invitee kind of guy more than a guarantee.
Right, and that may be what they end up getting. That may be the caliber.
Yeah, if they brought him in and just we're bringing this guy to camp right now, I'd be satisfied with that.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I'm getting pretty far down the list. You mentioned Brett Phillips already. Did Brett Phillips sign?
Yes, he's like all Royals. He goes out to pasture with the Chicago White Sox. So
yeah, so there are still some names. Jackie Bradley Jr.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You want to avoid giving, not just bringing in a guy like that, but then realizing he's done and still putting him on the roster because you didn't have any other options.
Yeah, but overall, I think we're both very pleased. And if they do add a left-handed bat, I mean, man, I continue to just be very impressed with the fact that every box is getting checked. If he, because like the left-handed bat wasn't really on the initial list, but he added it after he had checked all the other boxes. And if he gets that as well, and then 3 front office guys, I mean, is that enough? Is that everything you could ask for, or did you?
I think. I mean, these are the big names, mind you. Like, we don't know all the names at the lower level. I'll give you an example. Just 2 days ago, a gentleman named Gabe Levy tweeted out that he was being hired by the Royals. Here, I should probably bring up the exact tweet. I believe he was hired as an amateur scouting analyst. What struck me about this particular person is that he was not working for a major league organization. He was not working for college. He was working for Driveline. So, and we've talked about how a lot of these in for-profit, privately owned, Tread obviously is where Cole Reagan's developed an extra 5 miles on his fastball, but the original, the gold standard was Driveline baseball. And so somebody who was working at Driveline, leaving Driveline, with today being my last day at Driveline, I'm excited to say I'm joining the Royals R&D team as an amateur scouting analyst. I learned an unbelievable amount from Driveline. It was an amazing experience to be a data analyst at a company that values data as much as them. I don't know anything more about this guy, but that kind of hiring, those are the things that are there was no press release for that. But if the Royals are supplementing the big name front office hirings with bringing in presumably young, smart, very, very motivated people who have learned at progressive organizations the cutting edge of baseball analysis, I'm fully on board with that.
Yeah, we had Daniel Mack on, I don't know, towards the end of last year. And it's one of the things he said was that they were expanding the department, right? And it's intriguing. I think it's exciting that they're expanding it, not just a bunch of Daniel Macks, right? I think it shows how Daniel
they were expanding the computer side. Like, he was talking about the data, and this is a scouting analyst as well. I mean, and maybe there's probably an overlap of both. I mean, the best people are the people who can do both.
Well, it's a data analyst in the thing.
I think it was an amateur scouting analyst. Yeah, amateur scouting analyst. So,
I thought you had data in there as well. Like, he was going to be doing data on amateurs.
Well, he's joining the Royals R&D team, so maybe that's what it is.
Maybe that's what had me
thinking. But that's great if you're bringing in a scout. You want the scouts to be there with the data, and you want the data guys to be sitting with the scouts. Like, so much of what makes the best organizations work is that communication between the quants and the guys in the field, the scouts and the data people, until they, can correlate what they're seeing in the data with what they're seeing with their eyes. And I think that's something the Royals are trying to move to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. All right, let's talk a little bit. By the way, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations and no commissions. In-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call them at 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Again, online at GannAsphalt.com, handling literally everything when it comes to your parking lot, whether it's the bumpers, the signage, the striping, parking lot itself. They do it all. Gann Asphalt. I didn't know parking lots were so complex until I got to know the guys at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Great people as well. Tell them you heard about them right here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. The stadium announcement woven in here. The Friday news dump. We always love it. Sitting there on 5:00 when a release comes out on a Friday. The Royals and Chiefs putting out a joint statement saying that they are willing to sign. And there's a big meeting coming up as we sit here on Sunday night tomorrow. It's at 3:00, by the way. So many of you may be consuming this podcast after this meeting has already happened. We're discussing it before it's happened. But they wanted to get it out there before the meeting of all the folks that are going to put whatever on the ballot got together and said, we're in it together. We'll extend the 3.8-cent sales tax. Each of us will take our share. We're going to knock off $200 million in costs by paying our own insurance, basically, on the stadiums, which has become a new little, for the last couple of months, have been a talking point for the two sides going back and forth about things. So I think the point of the statement of the release was to say, this is an even better deal than what you had last time. And in it is a commitment for the Chiefs to renovate Arrowhead. Let me just tell you, as a Kansas City guy, boo. I have no interest in renovating Arrowhead. I'd like a domed stadium that could bring Final Fours at least and one Super Bowl back to Kansas City. I don't understand how when we renovated 25 years ago, a big part of the sales pitch was to get a Super Bowl, and now that's nowhere to be found. That is irritating at the very least. But the Royals part of the equation is a commitment to Jackson County. This would end any kind of flirtations with North Kansas City. We still don't, I think it needs to be pointed out, no statement of where it is, no rendition of what it will look like. Just, we're going to get it up here on the ballot and you vote for it just to say, sure, give us the money to go put wherever we want to put it. Your reaction? I know it's not, and I'm not going to pay for it either. I'm across the state line, not in the county, the state, or the city of the good people that have paid for these stadiums for years and years and years. But at least, I don't know. I don't even know if it's progress. What's your reaction to hear that?
I mean, I would say it's progress in the sense that it never made sense to me for the Royals to build a stadium outside of Jackson County. Like, I know there was talk about, there's, I mean, I guess technically it's still possible, but I think the Clay County actually put out a press release or made a statement that they're not willing to meet the Royals demands. And for a baseball team that plays 81 home games a year, you want your stadium to be in a place that's accessible to all the fans, but also ideally to have stuff to do around the stadium. I mean, that was always been the one weakness of the Truman Sports Complex. It's otherwise fantastic facility because it was designed from the ground up to host sporting events. But the problem is there's nothing to do around the stadium. And as somebody who comes in either for Royals or Chiefs games, I've stayed a few times at the old the Adams Mark Hotel. That was it's convenient for the ballpark. There's nothing to do aside from walk back to your hotel. So I think this is progress in that sense that it should be in Jackson County. But yeah, it's hard to really evaluate without knowing exactly where they're going to put it. It does, trying to read through the tea leaves here, it does seem like there's progress in the sense that both sides here are inching closer to an agreement. I think that, the clock is ticking because the Royals and Chiefs want this on a ballot in April. And to get on the ballot, they need to actually have a proposal to put on that ballot here in the next week or two. So, it's a little premature for us to talk about it. We'll know a lot more between now and the next podcast, I hope. But, sometimes you just have to have a deadline in order to actually get the wheels spinning.
Yeah, and I think this is progress in the sense that it's the next step. I don't think it's going to pass. I don't even know if it's going to get on the ballot, but it is at least a statement of, okay, we're in Jackson County. Now, again, I don't even know. Like I've long felt that it was a mistake to rule Kansas out, if nothing else other than we have an option, right? I don't think anybody in this town wants to hear about we could go to LA or we could go to Las Vegas, whatever like that. And I don't think either one of the ownership groups want to do that. But I think having alternatives, having competition is important. And I do think this is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out with former Royal Frank White, who's the county commissioner. I mean, that's what's so amazing about this whole discussion is that at the essence of it, well, at least what around the periphery people are pointing to is that Frank White is the holdup with Jackson County getting something done. And that everything that the clubs are doing is to try to put pressure on Frank White to sign on that to get this passed. That is,
it's definitely, if you were writing, this is a movie. It's a great hook. Former guy who's had his number retired by no, we're not just talking about Royals Hall of Famer, but like literally his number's out there on the fence, and he is standing in your way. Yeah, and I do think the ultimate resolution of this will determine not just in some way John Sherman's legacy, but I think Frank White's as well. If Frank White is seen as driving a hard bargain for his constituents and a deal gets done, but maybe the Royals and Chiefs don't get quite as much money as they want, doesn't cost the county as much as it could have, he could come out of this in the long run looking really good. If he ends up being, if it looks like he's just being intransigent or holding a grudge against, because that's the other part of the movie script here, the team that basically fired him from his position as a broadcaster because he was too critical of the team. If it looks like he's being petty, that's going to damage his reputation, I think, quite a bit. So there's a lot riding on this for Frank White as well as for the Royals themselves.
Well, here, listen, I'll read the last two statements that are up here from Matt. One of our, Matt's a great viewer and listener of the podcast. He said, I'm tired of Jackson County asking me for more taxes, especially after Frank White increased my property taxes this year. And by the way, for those that don't live in Jackson County, I live virtually across the street from it, but some of my relatives are right across the street. And I've seen how much we're talking about 70%, 80%. I mean, like almost doubling of property taxes that are out there. Matt goes on, Frank White can just go away for all I care. That's about as nice as I'll be here. And, Michael says, Frank White, petty. I like this one. Has Sherman considered guaranteeing Frank White his number will hang at the new stadium too? I
will say unretiring a guy's number would be a power move of like ultimate pettiness.
Yeah. It's and I think this is a great point too. Noah John says, wasn't Frank White's reelection just last year? Clearly Johnson County voters agreed with him. Yes, it was. It was just last year. And Buccaneer Bruce, they increased my mom's property tax by 65%, right? Like I contested, help my mom contest her property tax, and it was like a 20% increase in Prairie Village, Kansas. And in Jackson County, I mean, it was astronomical. And so now, people who don't want a ballpark, non-sports fans are probably like, hey, we got all this, increase going on right here. We don't need to be spending money on a baseball team when I have to flip the bill. But people who are sports fans are saying, wait a minute, you're swimming in money now. Like, at least give me something to do here. Like, don't lose the ball clubs. And I think that's something that, at some point, it's like, what do you want your legacy to be? Right? Like, do you want to be the guy who ran the Kansas City Royals out of Jackson County? I think I'll say this. If North Kansas City's out of the mix, it seems like they're making progress.
Right.
That's what I'll say with that. All right. Last thing we want to talk about here tonight is if you caught our last couple of podcasts over the holidays, Rany and I spent an inordinate amount of time right? I'm behind on everything in my life now because of the time we spent
It was worth
drafting. Yeah, it was. It was fun. Drafting our all-time Royals teams, and we have results on who did better. And not shockingly, Rany came up with all the rules and changed them several times during the process, managed to eke out a victory.
Okay, stop it. First off, I changed them to benefit you because there was confusion. Anyway, it's a little more complicated than that. But yes, one of our devoted viewers and listeners who on Twitter goes by, what do you go by? Third String Armchair, but it's here in the chat as Cameron Fletcher. Graciously volunteered to run a simulation of our two teams in Out of the Park Baseball, which is probably the premier baseball simulation that you can play. And I helped him out a bit with just giving him lineups and rotations, picking the closers. That I put together the most realistic lineup I could for you.
Yeah.
I think I had Kevin Seitzer leading off. I split up your two lefties in the lineup, so I couldn't run Dan Quisenberry out there for 7 right-handers in a row. It took some trial and error. The first time he ran a trial run, and you destroyed my team. I mean,
That's the one we should use.
Yeah. Well, we would have, except that he went into the code because I was like, "There's got to be something wrong here," and it took him 2 seconds to realize, oh, somehow the computer ended up playing Bobby Witt Sr. at shortstop. So you can imagine how having a pitcher hitting 038 and making 116 errors at shortstop might have biffed the simulation a little bit. So we got it straightened out, and then he ran not just 1 but 10 full seasons to minimize any random variance luck. So 1,620 games between our two teams. The first thing, the first thing that really stood out from the results was that putting together 2 all-star teams like this tends to break the simulation a little bit. I don't care how realistic it is, but when the worst player on everybody's team was still above average, the computer, I guess, just didn't really know how to handle it. So I was curious to see, would the pitchers win out with the hitters? Would it end up being where the average ERA was right around a normal major league season? Well, the pitchers did a very good job of limiting home runs. I think the most home runs, Danny Tartabull averaged 25, 25.4 home runs a season, but nobody else was over 20. But the pitchers, their batting average on balls in play was through the roof. So to give you an example, Brett Saberhagen, in 200 and I'm averaging this down per season, an average of 208 innings for a season, gave up 12 home runs, which is about where he was in real life. He was very good at limiting the home run. He gave up 291 hits. So on your team, you had Dennis Leonard average 180 innings and 260 hits. The teams as a whole, your team batted, let me bring the numbers up here, 324 as a team, and mine hit 319.
I know how to put together a lineup, man.
Yeah, you do. Well, but I averaged 130 home runs. You averaged 95. The power was, so it's like the computer just moved all of the offense from home runs to singles. Kevin Seitzer hit 345 for you. George Brett hit 370 for me.
If people didn't catch those podcasts, it was 1980 George Brett playing for him. Right. I had 1980 Kevin Seitzer. We were drafting individual years.
87, 89, 87. 87 his rookie year. 87 Kevin Seitzer.
87 Kevin Seitzer. And so his individual years of each player.
But literally of the starting guys in your lineup, everybody hit 300 or better except for Jay Bell, who only hit 287. For me, Salvador Perez only hit 288. Everyone else was over 300. So weird.
Yeah.
So that's
I would say flawed.
Well, probably flawed. Yes.
There's no way that Cy Young, Brett Saberhagen, and Cy Young, Zach Greinke, and
I agree.
We're talking about great years. We're going to give up back. To me, I think there's a flaw. The computer is weighted too far towards the offensive side.
Or it basically said the offense is amazing, the pitching is amazing. Something has to be bad. It must be the defense. That would be that's the other possibility here. So that was certainly a flaw. The other thing was that understandably, the computer wasn't really sure how to handle our pitching staff with all this excess starters that we had. So, for instance, Brady Singer and Gil Mesh, you had Singer, I had Mesh, ended up pitching out of the bullpen. You had Danny Duffy and Larry Gura as left-handed starters, but the computer sensibly realized don't need them as a starter, so they pitched in relief. So it wasn't perfect by any means. So the final results were your team, the Team Soren, won 781 games. Team Rany won 839. So on average, I went 84 and 78. You went 78 and 84. Based on the flaws here, based on
that was just purely head to head, right?
Purely head to head, exactly. And
right.
Cameron said he has time. He might even try to run a simulation for each of our teams separately in a league with like all the 100-win teams of the last 20 years, just to see. Because I knew I certainly am not going to say my team is definitively better than yours based on the weird flaws that went into this. If anything, I think the one takeaway I'm comfortable saying is our teams were pretty competitive. We're pretty well balanced. I think that is something I think we can both be happy about. I think it's reasonable that my team might do better than yours head to head, and yours might do better against other teams. Simply because you built your team, you went in with the strategy of build the best team possible in general, whereas I went in with the strategy of build a team to beat your team.
Yeah.
So it's possible my team might be slightly better, but I think it was a fun exercise, and I think that we did end up with teams that are pretty well evenly matched.
But at the end of the day, we said we play each other, and you got the wins. So congratulations! You put together the better.
Thank you. I accept your defeat graciously, even if I'm not sure that it's deserved. So.
Well, it was a lot of fun, and my knowledge of Royals baseball, which I thought was pretty good, got a lot better in doing this. And
certainly like 70s baseball.
Yeah, it was. I was never a Stratomatic guy. I hear Curtis and Danny Clinkscale talk about Stratomatic all the time, and I didn't play Stratomatic, but this was a little bit of like a foray into it, and I could get into it. I mean, I understand why those guys like it, the numbers. I mean, I played rotisserie baseball. And so I get excited about the numbers and going through all the players and everything. But this was really cool. It was a great deep dive into the history of Royals baseball.
And I think that was the difference between the way we drafted really reflects the fact that I played Stratomatic for a quarter century, and you played rotisserie fantasy style baseball, because you're just trying to accumulate the numbers, the best players. Right. And I'm sitting there like thinking, okay, seventh inning, you've got 4 right-handed hitters up in a row. I'm bringing Quisenberry in from the bullpen, and I'm not starting a left-hander against you. You've got too many right-handers. So I'm thinking we were thinking in different ways, which made for a clash of styles, and I think more interesting results that way.
Yeah, I wish it were 25 years, but it's 1991 was my first year of rotisserie baseball. So we're at 30. We had the 23 season, right? So that would put us at 33. I've done 33 seasons.
1992
times as many as 5 or 6 teams in the same year too.
Okay, well that's great. I played Stratomatic since 1992, but I actually gave it up after the 2016 season because it's a time suck, as you know.
Yes.
So that was a chance for me to get back to my roots a little bit with this.
I've done Score Sheet once for Kid Dynamics, as mentioned. I did it once. I did it with Joe Sheehan, and I actually did really, really well. Which I think
Score sheet is a great mixture of the both, because you have to build lineups and pitching staffs, and at the same time it's in the moment. It's not based on the previous year's results. You don't know what's going to happen, from week to week, just like you don't with rotisserie style baseball. So Score Sheet's a lot of fun. I've played that as well.
Yeah. All right, that's gonna do it. Any final words? Any final thought for Royals fans out there, whether it was on our draft on the side?
Well, it's the first episode of the new year. I guess technically
actually our second.
I guess technically the last one aired on the first. Spoiler.
You and I
we did tape it in 2023, so it's our first live broadcast of 2024. I am finding myself, this happens every year. Damn it, Soren! But I'm finding myself surprisingly optimistic. Like that the Royals maybe head in the right direction. They're making moves for the short term that I like, and making moves for the long term that I really like. But they're starting from if not ground zero, then ground one. So I want to temper my expectations in the short term, but still I am reasonably optimistic where they're going.
Yeah, I am as well. All right, that's going to do it for us, for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. I'm Soren Petro. Thank you to our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Don't forget, if you need anything done, whether it's the signage, the striping, the parking lot itself, they do it all. It's an incredible business. They're fantastic at what they do. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com, our proud sponsors here at the Kaufman Corner podcast. Make sure you tell them you heard about them here on Kaufman Corner. We will see you a week from Sunday, I think. Maybe Monday, but it should be Sunday.
Probably. I think the Chiefs play Saturday. So
Chiefs play Saturday, so we shouldn't have anything in touch, but just follow us both on Twitter and you will we'll give you an update. So for Rany, I'm Soren saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.